we're looking out at one of the most beautiful views I think I've ever seen out there. And the land we're on is glorious conservation land, but we acknowledge that it is the original territories of the Ojibwe and Anishinaabe First Nations. Down there in the valley is the River Humber meandering through its valley, and it marks the location of the Carrying Place Trail, which has been there for thousands of years. And for millennia, First Nations people have traveled the Carrying Place Trail and settled beside it. And we also acknowledge the importance of acknowledging their presence on this special landscape for them. I have the great pleasure of introducing the Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries, the Honourable Lisa MacLeod. 20 months ago now, it was on a phone call with the Minister that I and the other agency heads realised that we would have to close at the end of that day, marking the first of the lockdowns in this extraordinary period we've lived through. And I would just like to acknowledge personally how grateful I am to the Minister for being there for us. She was there right at the beginning, and she's had our backs throughout this extraordinary period that we've been through, listening to us, visiting us, discussing ways through. Let's just say that no management training had prepared me for navigating the stormy waters of a global pandemic. And we were all in that together, and the Minister played an astonishing role there as a tireless advocate for the sector that surely must be one of the hardest hit of all. So with that, I'll introduce Minister MacLeod.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian. It is incredibly humbling today to be here at the home of Canadian art. The McMicheal Gallery is a prized possession, a crown jewel for the Ontario government, in particular for the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries. And I want to say thank you for your welcome here today. I'm always amazed and humbled when I get to walk through these doors to see how incredible the artwork is that you have in your collection. But more importantly, it's love letter to artists from our country, and in particular, as I want to talk about today, our province. Joined with Ian today, who is our President and CEO of the McMicheal Gallery, is our Chair, Andy Pringle, who has done incredible work during this pandemic. In fact, I want to say thank you to Andy, because I believe it was during the pandemic when I made the call to see if he would be our chair, and he graciously accepted. And these have been very difficult times for our 18 agencies and attractions within the ministry, given in many cases they were shuttered, as Ian has mentioned. And in other cases, our granting organizations have seen an unprecedented level of needs. And I'd like to, at this point as well, recognize Rita Davies, who is our chair of the Ontario Arts Council, and who's not on the podium, but our dear friend, who is our President and CEO of the Ontario Arts Council, Carolyn Vaselli. Thank you very much for being here. The demands on the Ontario Arts Council, the Ontario Trillium Foundation, that Ontario Creates and the Heritage Trust have been unprecedented during this time, and they have been able to pivot. And I know we use that word a lot, but they have been able to pivot in order to make sure we are getting money out to not-for-profits, to organizations, cultural institutions, artists, and all of those who lost income or their revenues during this time. I'm also pleased that we're here today with one of Canada's greatest Indigenous artists, who has had the opportunity to be part of performance arts, sculpture, writing, and is right now mentoring a young and emerging artist right here at the McMicheal, and that's Bonnie Devine. Bonnie, thank you so much for joining us here today. You know, Bonnie is part of a wonderful group of Indigenous artists from the province of Ontario. Names like Norval Morrisseau, Roy Thomas, whose wife Louise actually sold me this beautiful scarf by Christy Belcourt, and James Simon. I had the opportunity this past summer to visit the Manitoulin Island with Chief of Wacomican First Nations and Ceded Territory, Duke Peltier, as well as with Indigenous Tourism Ontario's Kevin Ishwagan. And that period of time greatly inspired me and allowed me to see through a different set of eyes the abilities, the capabilities, the strength of the Indigenous peoples, but also the profound and incredible works of art that we should be supporting as a government. And that's why I'm here today. Our government, your Ontario government, is investing an additional $5 million that includes granting programs for Indigenous artists and art organizations, as well as emerging artists. This is going to be administered through our agency, the Ontario Arts Council, and the investment will provide funding through project grants. The first is $4 million in Indigenous Arts Support Program, directly inspired by the First Nations and Indigenous peoples on the Manitoulin. This $4 million project grant will be for Indigenous art and artists organizations working in a variety of disciplines, including dance, literature, media arts, multi and inter-arts, music, theater, and visual arts, as they research, develop, and create new work and engage with their communities. On this Treaty Week, it's also important that I recognize the work of Minister Greg Rickford, our Indigenous Affairs Minister, who has been doing incredible work with our communities across Ontario and who has helped inspire this investment. It's also important that we recognize the language speakers and language keepers in every Indigenous community across Ontario. And this fund will allow for that as well in terms of investments to those who are eligible. And I'm looking forward to seeing the fruits of this project. And I'm looking forward to seeing the results of these investments. The second announcement we're making today is a Career Catalyst project for new generation artists. It will be a $1 million grant program for those who are 18 to 30 years old, professional artists in any artistic discipline. These grants will support 500 individual artists as they work to build career momentum and recover from challenges related to the pandemic. The organizations and creators that we will be assisting with this new $5 million investment into the Ontario Arts Council will ensure that they continue to be the backbone of the province's arts infrastructure, providing local jobs for musicians, writers, painters, actors, dancers, language speakers, and many, many more. A strong, resilient, and diverse arts sector is important to Ontario. It's important because the last 20 months, the sectors that we represent in heritage, sport, tourism, and culture industries were hit first. They were hit hardest, and they are taking the longest to recover. Many of the people who work in these sectors have lost their income and their livelihoods. It's never been more important to invest in them for two very important reasons. The first is the social recovery of the province of Ontario. And if I might, I will say this. When we started our cautious and gradual reopening and the McMicheal was able to reopen, I had a call from someone I've known for many years in Toronto who I didn't think was an art lover. But his wife said to him, "I am going to the McMicheal. I need to be there for my mental health." And I think in terms of the social recovery of this province, to support artists, to support those who bring us joy, to support the entities that allow us to experience that artistry is incredibly important for our social recovery. But also make no mistake, when we invest in an artist, we are also investing in the economic recovery of the province of Ontario. Arts and culture in this province pre-pandemic represented $25 billion in GDP. All told, the sectors I represent injected $75 billion into Ontario's economy. And arts and culture are a very important part of our heritage, of our tourism, and even our sport. And so I look forward to seeing the results of these investments, because I know that each person that we are going to invest in with this $5 million is going to yield a great economy and a great society for the province of Ontario post-pandemic. I'd like to now turn it over to my friend and our chair of the Ontario Arts Council to talk a little bit about how we will administer this program. Rita?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Minister. Bonjour. Buzo Sego. It is such a thrill to be here today. First of all, I get to see this inspiring art piece in its initial stages and to meet its creator, the distinguished Anishinaabe Ojibwe artist, Bonnie Devine. All of us here today are here, as the minister said, because we recognize the unique contributions of Indigenous artists and their importance to the cultural identity of Ontario. After so many months of pandemic life, I must say it feels great. It really does. Be back in a gallery, especially in a gallery featuring work that is so iconically Canadian by both Indigenous and non-Indigenous artists. Thank you very much to the McMicheal Gallery for hosting us in this wonderful space. On behalf of my board colleagues on the Ontario Arts Council board, including our newly appointed Vice Chair, Danny Peters, who's here today, our CEO, Carolyn Vesely, Indigenous Arts Officer, Erica Eiserhoff, Director of Granting, Kelly Langard, and Director of Communications, all of them are here today. I want to express our appreciation to Minister MacLeod for her support for this funding program, this very needed new funding that will further improve important activities and art making in Indigenous communities across the province. OAC has a long history of funding Indigenous artists. 50 years ago, we began those programs. Our granting staff, our Indigenous arts officers have developed a variety of programs to assist the work of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis artists. But we still have ground to cover. This announcement today, Minister, thank you so much for this far-sighted and timely funding. Thank you also for being such a valiant champion of the arts, not just today, not just through the pandemic, but before and I think after. I know that that is your role of the arts, culture, and tourism industries. Thank you, Minister. And now we will hear from Andy Pringle, the chair of the board of the McMicheal Gallery.
Thank you, Rita. And good morning, distinguished guests and esteemed colleagues. My name is Andy Pringle, and I have the honor to be the chair of the Board of Trustees of the McMicheal Canadian Art Collection. And as the minister mentioned, it's been just over a year since she appointed me. It's been an interesting and challenging time, but not only should I pay tribute to the leadership of the McMicheal team under Ian's direction for the incredible job they've done, but Minister, let me say and let me add my thanks to you for you and your team for the leadership that you've shown through this difficult period of time. It's hugely appreciated and very important to the people of the province and to the McMicheal Gallery. Now, I'm pleased to be here today representing McMicheal. I think many people are not aware that fully 1/3 of the museum's collection is made by Indigenous artists. We showcased that collection recently in the exhibition Early Days, which closed this summer to make way for our current exhibition of Uninvited, which also celebrates the work of Indigenous women artists from a century ago. Upcoming projects at the McMicheal over the next couple of years include exhibitions on Indigenous artists Dempsey Bob, Merrill McMaster, and Elizabeth Inushtutuk, among others. We are also the custodians of more than 80,000 original drawings from Cape Dorset, which are currently in the process of being digitized so that they can be more available to people across the country. Outside of the gallery itself, we are home to the Menotakmik Garden, designed and planted in 2019 under the guidance of Elder Shirley Charles, Chippewa of Georgina Island First Nation, and Lynn Short from the Humber College Horticultural Department. The design of the Menotakmik garden is based on the traditional Anishinaabe teachings of the four directions. The garden represents the commitment of McMicheal and its community to restoring the land on which the gallery sits along the traditional Carrying Place Trail. And today, as mentioned, we're very privileged to have Anishinaabe Ojibwe artist Bonnie Devine creating a specific, site-specific mural installation titled Water to Water, A Way Through the Trees, which, as you can see behind us, is here in the process of being established in this alcove of the Grand Hall. For many months now, Bonnie and her protege, Mariah McMicheal, have been researching the historic Carrying Place Trail along the Humber River, which runs through the territory on which our gallery stands. As part of their research, Bonnie and Mariah have worked with the Toronto and Regional Conservation Authority to examine the 16th century Huron-Wendat village, now identified as Seed Barker Archaeological Site, located just a few minutes drive south of us at the intersection of Highway 400 and Rutherford Road. While they work and are working at McMicheal, Bonnie and Mariah will be sharing their perspectives and their knowledge about the land and its histories with all of our visitors. Inspired by the topography and the history of this region of Ontario, their installation will combine painting, archival collage, printmaking, and sculpture, incorporating as well some of the historic archaeological antiquities from the old village site. We welcome the wonderful news today from the Minister, and we celebrate the support of Indigenous art. We know that these resources will help Indigenous artists to continue to preserve their knowledge and their traditions through artistic practice. With that, I'd now like to introduce the artist herself, Bonnie Devine. Bonnie is an installation artist, video maker, curator, and writer, and she will be serving as co-editor of our upcoming publication in 2023, Early Days, Indigenous Art at the McMicheal. Her work emerges from storytelling and image-making traditions that are central to the Anishinaabe culture. Many of you will have seen her installation, video, and curatorial projects, which have been presented in solo exhibition and at exhibitions and film festivals across Canada, as well as abroad. Bonnie is an associate professor emerita and the founding chair of the Indigenous Visual Cultural Program at OCAD University. And she is also a prestigious recipient of a 2021 Governor General's Award in Visual and Media Arts. So we're delighted that Bonnie is able to join us today to give us some insights into her work. Bonnie?
Thank you and good morning, Ani. This project, which we call From Water to Water, A Way Through the Trees, began as a commemoration of the old Carrying Place portage that once ran along the Humber River from Lake Ontario to Lake Simcoe and was a vital passage from southern Ontario to Georgian Bay. The Carrying Place Trail, which incidentally crosses through the lands just outside these windows, was one link in a series of passages that, starting in John Graves Simcoe's time, opened the Great Lakes to trade, exploration, resource extraction, and settlement. It's an important story. But as Indigenous artists born in Ontario, Mariah McMicheal and me, we're not content to celebrate only that history. As our work on the project and our research developed, we began to consider the role of the Carrying Place in the deeper history and enduring legacy of Indigenous economic, political, and cultural exchange in Southern Ontario. A history that stretches back before European contact for hundreds and perhaps thousands of years. With the support of the McMicheal Canadian Collection, Mariah and I were able to reach out to elders and knowledge keepers from the Wendat Nation, now living in exile far from their homelands. And in consultation with them, we began to piece together an account of the Wendat story that, with their permission, we are painting on these walls. Some people may wonder, why should the Ontario government provide specific financial support for Indigenous artists? Well, this is one reason why. So that a vital but obscure history may find its voice, and so that a generation of Ontarians of all backgrounds may find a link to their country's roots. For that, we say to you, Madam Minister, and to the leadership team at the McMicheal Canadian Collection, thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Ooh, that's a tough act to follow. You're pretty incredible, Bonnie. Thank you so much for being here today, and I look forward to coming back upon completion of what you and Mariah are preparing.
Thank you. We will now go to the Zoom meeting for live questions. Just a reminder that we have one question, one follow-up. If you do have a question, please raise your hand, or you can put your question in the chat box as well. A moment here. Minister, there are no questions at this time.
Oh my, they must really like it in the media. Thanks everybody for being here, and to all of you who took some time to be here to watch this event. I really appreciate it. I think what we're doing here today is quite meaningful, and it's going to help, I think, at least two of our agencies, of course, the Ontario Arts Council, the McMicheal Gallery, and I dare to say probably the AGO, as well as many art galleries across Ontario. When some of these works are completed, I look forward, Bonnie, to seeing more in our galleries across the province. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.